age of the MCU is over. The Infinity Saga has ended, and some of the original Avengers stories have come to satisfying or devastating conclusions. If it feels a little bit like you're being put through the ringer, then it's because you totally have. Luckily, the mascara can be reapplied and red eyes will subside eventually, and what we'll be left with is the very real picture that the last 11 years of Marvel Studios' incredible expanded universe have been some of the most rewarding, enriching, and entertainment filmmaking experiences of all time. While it's somewhat inevitable that there will be lots of extremes and binaries applied to Endgame, the reality is that it is a complex experience. It is both magnificently entertaining and problematic, both brilliant and frustrating at times, but what matters is the balance, just as it does to Thanos. And now, with the film out in cinemas and Adam Cleary's excellent review already out, plug, I'm Josh from WhatCulture.com, and this is Ups and Downs for Avengers Endgame. Let's start with the positives, shall we? And something that has more to do with Marvel than it does Endgame's specific filmmakers, but the marketing has been genius for this film. When the Russos claimed that there was a lot of misdirection in the trailers and even fake scenes that had been shot, they really were not kidding. Several trailer shots were manipulated to remove entire characters, and lots more were artfully concealed out of context to completely throw us all off. Watching the film and comparing it to the expectations we all had, it's nothing like it could have been. It was absolutely nothing like we were led to believe it might be, apart from in the broadest possible strokes. And in an era where studios happily give away the final shot in trailers, that is such a great thing and an up. On the same point, it is impressive how much of the film the studio managed to keep locked down, meaning there's also plenty of shocks, and again, that's an up. Sure, there were lots of leaks that were absolutely spot on, but through a campaign encouraging the consideration of misdirection and the not exactly unconscious encouragement of the spread of fake leaks, or so I suspect, they managed to ball up the real leaks with the falsities, meaning no one had any idea what was going on. And that meant that some of the more ridiculous, unexpected elements that were leaked were simply batted away as being impossible because of how absurd they seemed. And even beyond that, there are some key story elements that happen, and crucially, some that do not, that will have come as a surprise to even the most committed spoiler fiends out there. In 2019, with this film ranking as the most valuable possibly ever in spoiler terms, that is incredibly impressive. It'll be no surprise to you that, as with Avengers Infinity War, Endgame is deeply invested in grand moments. Unlike Infinity War though, they don't come particularly frequently, because the focus is mostly on one extended set piece in particular, which forms the bulk of the movie's final third. Fortunately for us, that final third is some of the most breathtaking, bewildering, astonishing film spectacle anyone will ever witness. Not just in terms of comic book movies, not just in terms of war movies. Even compared to Wakanda's final battle in the last movie, the sense of scale and spectacle in Endgame is virtually unprecedented, and that is definitely an up. It acts as an escalation of what came before without getting unwieldy. There are more characters, more team-up choreography, more memeable moments, and it's also incredibly intoxicating, and it even features one of my favorite shots in all of cinema. That is mad, and I did not expect it. We've been primed to think of Endgame as, well, an ending since well before Infinity War came out. It's not only the full stop of Phase 3 or to the Infinity Saga, but it's also the end of the first age of the Avengers, and it concludes that in an immensely satisfying way, which is definitely an up. Rather cleverly, while it was called the Infinity Saga, that seems to have been, again, misdirection to hide the fact that this was, in fact, the Tony Stark saga. Sure, the endings for some of the other original characters, Hawkeye, Thanos, and Captain America in particular, are great and very satisfying, but in the end, the real story was the Iron Man one. Even without spoiling it, it's an incredible payoff to how this story has developed from the moment he appeared back in 2008, and this ending is just brilliantly well crafted from top to bottom. Interestingly, it also comes with the caveat of important things yet to come too, which is clearly key. Now, if there's anything that people will focus on as being divisive in the film, a lot of it is probably linked to the humor. Not merely in the frequency, but in terms of where it comes in proximity to those huge, tense, emotionally challenging moments. But very impressively and an up for the film is that it never really shoehorns any comedy in a way that some other MCU movies have in the past to less success. And that's mostly because the comedy duties fall to Thor, Rocket, and in particular, Paul Rudd's Ant-Man, who is to be cherished and protected at all costs. Rudd's fish out of water comedy spirit works incredibly well here. We know that he's not the same as the other heroes, and there's an enormous reward in that. He's also key to the plot, obviously, as well, and he gets a great spectacle moment late on, but he knits lots of the scenes together with some very welcome levity. Moving on, just as Infinity War's opening act breathlessly began with the deaths of Loki and Heimdall, Endgame starts from a similarly motivated statement to show us where we stand for the rest of the movie, so it gets an up for that because it is equally as devastating. The opening is a scene chosen precisely to let you know there's going to be some serious emotional stakes here. It's not the same as the scene in space in Infinity War, but you feel the blows even stronger in this case because of their intimacy and actually their quietness. The beginning also lends itself to Hawkeye's storyline, which is wonderfully compelling right until the moment he's called into active duty, and it's all surprisingly grown up, especially for a film of this age rating. The new Ronin figure is a legitimate bloody badass, whose motivation is as dark as it is utterly convincing, and it all satisfyingly pays off the story that was seeded all the way back in Avengers Age of Ultron. I guess that film was good for something in the end then. And speaking of great character arcs, Hulk's entire characterization in Endgame gets one big green thumbs up for me. I wish I had one of those, the Hulk fists to do that, but didn't think. Yeah, some of the surprise might be taken out of it if you've been sweeping up all the juicy spoilers, but the payoff here for Banner is genius. Not only is the first appearance of the new and improved Banner one of the most hilarious in the entire MCU, but it also fits with the way the character has been heading again since Age of Ultron. Mark Ruffalo told us that this was going to be the culmination of that arc, and he wasn't wrong. And even knowing some things about it if you've been following spoilers, the moment of revelation and pretty much everything that follows for the Hulk is completely infectious. Also props to the effects department because Hulk has never looked this good, and he's always looked pretty damn good. While the satisfying element of the ending and Tony Stark's arc in particular have already warranted close inspection, it's important to address another part of the ending, the emotional toll it takes on us. This is an up, even though I practically cried for 20 minutes straight when I saw it for the second time at the weekend, and I'm still not fully recovered, but still, good job, guys. Sure, there is a slight whiff of The Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King's inability to deliver one concise full stop, but that approach isn't necessarily a bad thing, and it actually creates something that few will have thought impossible. It matches Infinity War's ending for emotional impact, but in a completely different way. In actual fact, there's something to be said for the idea that Endgame's most provocatively tear-jerking moment is more authentic than Infinity War's. It certainly has more character depth behind it, and the emotion you feel is a lot more complex than the shock the Russos manipulated into the Great Decimation and its aftermath. Like seriously, if you're a fan of these movies and you didn't cry at least once, then you've got a heart of stone. Part of the reason why the film hits so well, and another reason for its satisfaction rating being so high, is the craft in which the writers and the Russos approach character development. Even though this was supposed to be an escalation and you might have expected everything to be turned up to 11, the things the creators actually turned up were mostly the characters, which in my opinion is a massive, massive up. There's a lot more Cap here than there was in Infinity War. There's further examination of Tony Stark's reactions to trauma. There's a whole new dynamic for Thor and Hawkeye, and Black Widow and Hulk are completely different too, but everything works. And that's because despite all of the changes, nothing feels like an ass pull. Everything is set up and measured thanks to the luxury of time afforded by the decision to focus on a mostly smaller cast. Barely anyone that matters up to the point of the change of gear into the third act sees any of their storytelling compromised. Well, Rocket slightly takes a backseat, but he's not an OG Avenger, so it's kind of justified. But that is still impressive of a film of this scale. Of course, inevitably, lots of talk will turn to what comes next for the MCU after the end of Endgame, and there are lots of interesting theories to posit at this point. Quite what the ending means to the Avengers initiative is a pretty big question. Who might not return for future movies is another, but a surprising up is how Endgame sets up Guardians of the Galaxy 3. There's a very brief mention of what the story is going to focus on, as well as what we already know about Adam Warlock, and a brand new interesting development for the lineup. Without wandering into too much spoilerific territory, that has quickly become the most exciting film on Marvel's immediate slate, and it can't come soon enough. Which is a huge feat considering that the majority of the Guardians are barely in this movie. Now, our final up is a bit of a tricky one, as it's all about fanservice. Essentially, when fanservice is done badly, it's called, well, fanservice, and when it's done brilliantly, it's called payoff. Somehow, the idea of catering to fans is now a dirty concept, but it's not always a bad thing when it's done right. and Endgame certainly has a lot of payoff and gets an up for it. For the majority of the runtime, the Russos get the balance right. There are complex, organically built character moments and clever payoffs throughout, but there are also completely memeable moments as well. Captain America gets one, Hulk gets one, Ant-Man gets one, Iron Man gets a huge one, a whole group of heroes gets one, and even Pepper Potts gets one. None of those ones are anything but beautifully rewarding, and they will be the moments that transcend the limits of this film. They're the things that we'll talk about for years to come, which pay off over 10 years of investment into this universe. But now, for the negatives. Don't get me wrong, there are lots and lots of really very satisfying moments in this film. There are scenes that will have you on the verge of punching the air, and there are moments that will make you laugh and cry in equal measure. And thanks to those moments, it's easy to forgive the fact that this movie makes no goddamn sense. The plot takes the only viable option and adds some interesting conceits to it, but there's a lot of hand-waving, like the attempt to explain causality and paradoxes that comes across so willfully obtuse that it kinda just wants you to stop listening. But if you take a step back and try to pick everything apart, things just unravel. But that might be fine. Everything makes emotional sense, even if the logic might not hold up under scrutiny, and for viewers like me, that will be enough. But there's no denying that not everyone is just going to be able to go with the plot in the way the filmmakers want. Hell, we've had plenty of heated debates over it in the office already, so this has to get it down. Similarly, without spoiling the specifics, let's just say that Thor goes through a major change in the movie, in part to him failing to stop Thanos at the end of Infinity War. It's the latest in a series of examinations of culpability and PTSD, and given how well the MCU has dealt with both of those things in the past, you'd think it would do it really well here. But for all of the memeable qualities this new Thor comes with, and there is a lot, there's a pretty big, very insistent problem to the character that's partly linked to the disparity between his makeup as a comedy character and the reverence given to PTSD in the franchise so far. Look at anything beneath Thor's surface and it feels a little like his mental health, which should be in tatters given everything he's gone through, is the butt of a joke. It's not a total write-off, and there are times when genuine pathos shines through, but it's still a down, unfortunately. Now, remember that point I made about the distinction between payoffs and fan service? Well, here it comes again, because there are times, particularly during the second act, where the film begins to stray into the realms of backslapping fan service. Hell, there are even times when the directors might as well have turned to the camera with a knowing wink. As with Captain America's backside, for instance, in a lot of the scenes, they're telling us that they know what we want and they're happy for us to have it. But that their participation is a very conscious part of that transaction. Yes, it's good to get a lot of what we want, but if everything is the sweetest pie you've ever tasted, would you really want to gorge? So this sweet pie gets it down. I don't know how I ended up there. The sweet pie gets it down. What's that, Josh? Now, this final down might be a problem limited to the IMAX screening, so just pencil it in. But basically, a lot of the first act CGI is a little ropey. The sequence showing Ant-Man's experiments are a particularly glaring example of this, as Paul Rudd's face is digitally added to his suit visor and somehow looks magnified massively. Worse still is the distracting green screen work in most of the Avengers facility sequences. I have seen it on a regular screen since, and these sequences aren't as egregious there, but the effects still cost the film something when it's blown up to the highest possible definition. So by my count, that should be about 11 ups and 4 downs, and most of those downs are more like 0.5s to be fair. I'm not entirely sure I've grasped this concept, but I want to know what you guys think down in the comments below, and don't forget to check out the rest of the Endgame content on our channel, like Cleary's review, a rundown of our best moments, and plenty more to come. Even if you don't though, I've been Josh, thank you for watching, and I'll see you soon. Bye.